Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of Brandon Elrich is So Gay. I'm entitling this episode Is a Gay Christian an Oxymoron? Before we go on, I want to remind you to subscribe, click the like button, leave a comment. If you don't want to listen to the podcast, there's also a written version. There will be some different things in the written article that are not in this podcast, and vice versa. So you can listen to one, read the other one. So, anyway, I was raised in church and attended every week. Our family did. Went to Sunday school, went to Bible school in the summers. They had they had Bible school 2 days a week every week throughout the summer. It was a Pentecostal church, so it was conservative as religions go. The sermons were kind of fire and brimstone type of messages, if you're familiar with that. Basically, it's get saved or go to hell. There was no mincing of words, no sugarcoating that. They spoke in tongues and they prayed as they laid hands on the sick. People would, uh, if you were sick or had something wrong, you'd go up to the front, and usually the elders and some other people from the church would come up and lay their hands on them and pray for them to be healed. They believed and not only about in being saved, but also being quote unquote filled by the Holy Spirit. The sermons and song service were pretty long. There was no kind of program or agenda or anything. They would ask if anybody had a request, and somebody'd call out a song, and they'd sing all five verses of it, and they'd just go on until they felt like stopping. It was kind of a very free as far as the order of things. Um, they usually had a potluck dinner after the service every Sunday, and then another sermon in the afternoon after lunch. Our family usually didn't stay for the afternoon service, thank goodness. Our immediate family. I had other family members that stayed, and they would they would attend church every Wednesday night, both services on Sunday, Sunday school. Yeah, it was a lot. That type of church environment probably seems pretty eccentric if you didn't grow up with it. If you're not used to it, just walking in, you'd probably be might be a little bit weirded out by it. To me, it was seemed normal because, for one thing, I didn't have anything to compare it to. I'd never been to other churches. When as I got older, I just got used to how they did things there. The song service, the music was always great. It was lively and fun. They had talented musicians. There were several members of the church who played instruments, and so they had sort of a band up on stage, and the piano player was really good, somebody who played by ear, and it was just phenomenal. I was saved when I was probably about 9 or 10 years old. I was baptized in my grandpa's pond the following summer. A lot of churches have their own fancy baptismals, but back then our church, it was fairly small, but I think even other churches didn't have baptismals at that time. I think that was more of kind of a modern amenity, if you will. One issue with the church we attended was that it was about a 45-minute drive each way from our house. And when you've got young kids, getting them ready for church in the morning and driving back and forth every week is it it's a bit of a hassle. So one of the reasons why we attended it is because my it was my mom's family's church, and it's where my parents got married. My grandparents, my mom's parents went there. Some of her siblings went there. We knew everybody that attended. Uh, well, of course, because it was a smaller church, but also we're related to several of them. But then we started to attend my dad's family's church, which was Methodist. And if you're familiar with this denomination, they're about as far from a Pentecostal church as possible. They're very orderly. They sang a limited number of songs, but that partly had to do with the piano player because she couldn't uh, play a whole lot of them. But also, they wanted to keep things short. The sermon was fairly short, definitely compared to what I was used to. But we would take an offering, we would sing the doxology, we would do the call and response. The preacher would recite something, and the whole congregation in unison would respond to the minister. And they were all written in the back of the hymnal. There were just certain creeds that we would say. It was, I don't know, when you're just repeating things that you read, it it kind of loses its meaning. But anyway, that's not what this is about. I may have been curious about boys in elementary school when I was going to the Pentecostal church, but it really didn't come out in full force until I was in junior high, or what most people call middle school now, around seventh grade. That's when we started dressing out for PE, physical education. Of course, that's also when I started going through puberty. A lot of the boys in gym class took showers. I never took a shower in PE. Maybe you think that's gross, but I didn't feel I needed it because I did minimal physical activity in gym. I wasn't very good at sports, and I was usually one of the last ones to be picked. My friends weren't in sports. I didn't care about them. So I was basically just a body to fill a position, like in softball or kickball. I would be delegated to the outfield somewhere, and I would always hope that the ball didn't come to me. Other kids had more important roles in the games, the pitcher, catcher, that kind of thing, because I certainly wasn't going to do that. So anyway, I didn't sweat much, so I really didn't feel like I needed it. But the other reason I avoided the showers was I didn't want anyone to see me naked. Now, part of that had to do with my upbringing. Going to church in the Pentecostal church, like I said, it was very conservative. And in the Pentecostal church, women were not allowed to wear dresses or shorts. Boys couldn't wear shorts. We had to wear long pants. I'm not sure the reason exactly. Maybe they thought God didn't want to see a lot of leg. I don't know. But when we went to church, we were fully clothed. Our family, at least, we could wear shorts and stuff at home, but I had other family members who didn't. The girls always wore dresses, whether they were at home, at church, no matter what. And so I think that kind of spoke to the conservative mindset of your body. Like um, it might be considered maybe even risque to show too much skin. So I think that mindset kind of stuck with me, and I was very I was self-conscious about my body. I didn't want anybody to see me. But also, the other reason I didn't want to be naked is if I had been in the shower with those other boys, they would have definitely found out that I was attracted to guys after a glance down at my crotch. I did not have the mental or emotional capacity to control my erection while at the same time trying to avoid looking at other naked guys, which I did. I was curious and I tried not to make it obvious because if anyone caught me looking, I just couldn't imagine the teasing and the bullying that would ensue. We were taught in church about sins, the big sins, like murder, stealing, lying, adultery. That was all drilled into us, but the Bible mentioned homosexuality, and we read those verses, but we didn't dwell on them. So I think being gay seemed like it was kind of a different level of sin. It was definitely taboo, and most denominations considered it to be such an abomination that it shouldn't even be discussed. So you might be able to imagine that being a gay kid, growing up surrounded by that kind of attitude, was extremely difficult, to say the least. I experienced a lot of depression growing up through my teenage years. I'm not going to go into all of that here, partly because I've written about some of it in other articles, and I probably will again in some others, but that's not really what this episode is about. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to when I was an adult, when I finally accepted myself for who I am. And that was partly due to a book I read. This book is called The Ragamuffin Gospel by Brennan Manning. The overall message of the book is that God accepts everyone as they are. Reading this book and accepting its message was a big step in my coming out journey, but it was also a very important tool in my fight against depression. As adults, we're a lot of times we become judgmental. We sometimes think we know everything. And when we judge, basically we're putting ourselves above God. We think that we're better than others because we can point the finger at their flaws, even though obviously we have flaws too. Everyone's human. We all make mistakes. We're all fallible. But when we start pointing them out in others, that's when it becomes judgy. When we're adults, a lot of times we're stuck in our ways. We refuse to accept or even acknowledge some people who are different than us. The Bible talks about Jesus being friends and associating with all manner of people. If you're familiar at all with the Bible, you've probably heard about how he uh, talked to prostitutes and tax collectors who were very much hated by everyone. And, well, I think that's kind of true in some respects today. But he was friends with the poor, the sick, the crippled. He would even heal those who had leprosy. And Jesus said that we must come to God as little children. And in this book, The Ragamuffin Gospel, the author talks about what it means to be like a child. He says, if we maintain the open mindedness of children, we challenge fixed ideas and established structures, including our own. We listen to people in other denominations and religions. We don't find demons in those with whom we disagree. We don't cozy up to people who mouth our jargon. If we're open, we rarely resort to either or, like either creation or evolution, liberty or law, sacred or secular, Beethoven or Madonna. We focus on both and, fully aware that God's truth cannot be imprisoned in a small definition. I really like what he says about coming to God as a child. The problem with many churches today is over time they make their own definitions that aren't necessarily in line with God's. They've created their own rules. A lot of them say you can't be a Christian if, for instance, if you're gay or if you decide to get divorced. Many church members, including my family, say it's impossible to be both Christian and gay. If Jesus were walking the earth today, we'd see him befriending the housing insecure, the sick, the handicapped, and members of every marginalized community. You can't tell me I'm not going to heaven because I'm gay. I mean, you can, but you'd be wrong. So, have you been hurt by people in your life, in your past, in the name of religion? If you're part of the LGBTQ plus community, that is very likely. But it happens to others too. Many women stay trapped in a marriage to an abusive husband because their church doesn't allow divorce. I saw it in the church that I attended. They expected that even if you were a man or a woman in an abusive relationship, that you stuck with that partner because you made a vow, and no matter what, doesn't matter if he was a raging alcoholic, abusive jerk, to put it lightly, you had to stay with him, according to them. Church members shun certain sins and they put on a label to drive home that point. The, Someone who's divorced, they're a mistress, an alcoholic, a homosexual. It's hard to feel accepted in a church like that. And although they may not say anything directly to you, their judgmental and hateful looks speak volumes. So, in the middle of writing this the written article that goes along with this podcast, I also read an article by Jason Provencio, who's also known as the Mouthy Renegade Writer, and it coincided with what I was talking about here. In his article, he suggests the need to get back to a better kind of existence. Like when we were children, we assumed the best about those we met on the playground. And I agree with that. Children aren't racist, they aren't homophobic or discriminatory. They don't judge other kids until or unless they learn it from others, especially adults in their life, their parents, and sometimes the church. If you feel hatred toward a particular group, you should ask yourself why. Where did that come from? Was it taught by the church? And if so, you need again to ask yourself why. Why did that teaching come from them, where they're supposed to be examples of God's love? Did it come from the Bible? I can tell you that it definitely did not. Unfortunately, hate goes the other direction too. Many gay people harbor animosity toward the church as a whole because of certain individuals within it. And it's sad because there are a lot of church members who are very friendly and accepting, but when you experience it from so many people, who claim to be Christians or claim to be church members, it's it's hard not to kind of stereotype those who go to church and automatically assume that they're not going to accept you. But if you are part of the LGBTQ plus community, you shouldn't allow those closed-minded morons to keep you from a relationship with God, or at least a relationship with a community, a church community. There are many churches that will accept you and love you for who you are. Now, around here especially, they're a little more difficult to find. They're in a rural, conservative area, like in the one I live. There are some around, but it may take some looking. Good people still exist in the world, and I think it's worth finding them. So, is a gay Christian an oxymoron? Well, I'm not any kind of moron. Thank you very much. Again, I hope you subscribe, click the like button. I've got some subscribe options that I'm going to put in the notes. If you can't afford the full price, there are levels, donation levels, and I've got offers for my first 5 subscribers. So if you happen to be one of those, take a look at the notes and see if you're interested. And until next time, say goodbye, Zach.